Great.
Yes.
Okay, this is waiting for Kirsty a bit, but that's no problem. Welcome everybody for the people that are at home watching this episode back of the Climate Cafe Green Blue. I'm Sydney Stacks from the municipality of Nijmegen, and I'm doing this for many years with somebody who just dropped in, Floris Bogart. We're doing this Climate Cafe on many topics, but mainly on bioswales, green-blue infrastructure, but also infiltrating pavement, social interactions with the green environment, participation plans, and also floating water, floating buildings, floating solar panels, and many other topics. Everything that touches the green-blue environment or climate adaptation. And we also have a really interesting program today with an interesting speaker on nature-based solutions and the interaction with communities, I think. But I won't say too much because I think Shanae, maybe do you introduce her? Yeah,
Yes,
all right.
I'll do that gladly. I'm happy to introduce someone from my hometown in Cape Town. Yeah, so today we'll hear from Professor Kirsty ClimateCafe. She's the director of the Future Water Research Institute at the University of Cape Town. And today she'll share some of her work with us on the Water Hub and other living labs that use nature-based solutions to build climate resilience in the Western Cape of South Africa. Yes. Okay, Kirsty, you can share your presentation with us.
I will. Sorry. Yeah, I had to reshare it because it disappeared.
Yeah.
All right. Just let me put it in presenter mode. Okie dokes. I presume you can all see that.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes,
all perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I seem to have lost pictures of you, but that's fine. I'll carry on. And yeah, very nice to see you. Nice to see you, Floris. It's been some time. And thank you for inviting me here today. I always like talking about the research that we're doing here in South Africa, down at the southern end of the world, on climate resilience and how we build nature-based solutions into the different types of living labs that we operate as part of the Future Water Institute. So it's going to be a bit of a whistle stop. I'll give you a little bit of background into why we do what we do, and then some of the current work at the Water Hub and another living lab that we've been working in for the last 6 years or so. And yeah, I'm happy to be interrupted if there are questions of clarity. Otherwise, we can chat again at the end. So I think you've probably heard this, and many of you probably know this already. And in particular in South Africa, we have a multifaceted water crisis. And I'd say that quite deliberately because we really do have a lot of problems with both climate impacts, but also urbanization and population growth, and of course, real issues with services backlogs, infrastructure deficits, and poor water quality. We have very high levels of non-revenue water with high leakage and wastage, sometimes up to 60 to 80% in some of the smaller towns, with institutional issues and really major management problems within our urban areas. So this is a picture of flooding in Johannesburg, some very poor development decisions leading to stormwater problems downstream. The next one is of the Theewaterskloof Dam, which was one of our main supply reservoirs for Cape Town during the Day Zero crisis. I'm quite sure a lot of you have heard about that. We got down to around 13% in our supply reservoirs before it started to rain and we were lifted out of the drought. And the last one is the important one, I think, and really speaks to how we're going to be talking today and how we bring nature-based solutions into this conversation, is that because of the lack of services in a large percentage of our settlements in South Africa, the water quality through these settlements and into other urban watercourses around the cities becomes really problematic, and of course affects the availability of water of acceptable quality. So it is really a water security issue. And then linked to that, and what I hope to also be able to speak to a little bit today, is that water security is not only about adequate water, but it's also about that relationship between individuals, households, and communities, and the ways in which they navigate and transform those hydrosocial relations so that they can access water not only to drink, but the water that they need in ways that support sustained development of human capabilities and well-being. And that's really important in a country like South Africa, which has very low levels of employment. Our education systems struggle, and there are real issues around building sustainable livelihoods. And of course, water is so important for that. So we talk about future-proofing cities, and in South Africa, we've taken sort of I guess some inspiration, if you like, from the concept of water-sensitive design and water-sensitive cities, sort of Australian concept largely, although it is certainly seen around the world through concepts like sustainable drainage systems and low impact development and the like, where we think about multifunctional infrastructure. So how do we turn, in this case, in this picture, it's a stormwater canal. How do we turn that canal into something that starts to not only meet basic needs around flood alleviation, but also enhancing aspirational needs? It becomes the blue-green corridors. These blue-green corridors and nature-based processes become integral elements of the city's drainage infrastructure, but not only for flood conveyance, but also to bring people into these spaces to actually look at those socio-technical dynamics, to think about how we can enhance the nexus on water, energy, and waste, and really build these what we consider to be water-sensitive cities, keeping the water in the town and city. So Future Water Institute speaks directly to this. We were formed in 2016, so we're almost 10 years old now, as a transdisciplinary institute to really look at how we can build capacity and innovation around water resilience. We work in three different themes that are all underpinned by one on addressing relations and values around water. So the social science becomes really important in the ways that we do this transdisciplinary research and how we connect with non-academic partners in this space. And what's important here, I think, is that we're talking today about the spaces in which we work, and one particular space is what we refer to as living labs. And of course, they're not only places like the Water Hub or mining equivalents or what we're doing in and around the university, but also could be happening in small urban settings or in peri-urban spaces, as you'll see with some of the examples that I'll show you. Okay, so we'll start with the Water Hub, which is an off-campus urban living lab. It was set up some time ago, also around the time that Future Water came into being in 2016, where we started to think about using a site that was a discontinued wastewater treatment plant near the town of Franschhoek, which is approximately 60 kilometers northwest of Cape Town. It's a wine growing part of the country. It's very high-end accommodation. It's a sort of foodie capital, and it's a very beautiful part of the world. It's also the mountains around Franschhoek are some of the mountains that also deliver the water that we drink in the city of Cape Town and in Franschhoek itself. So the land use around the Water Hub is largely made up of agriculture. There is a significant informal settlement 2 kilometers upstream of the Water Hub, and in the picture here you can see the informal settlement on the slopes of the mountain. And it has a small river called the Stabiel River that runs through the informal settlement, through the lower parts of town where there are a sort of more formalized low-income settlement, through the agricultural area, and directly through the Water Hub, which is being developed here, and I'll show you what we've been doing at this water hub. So what it does is gives us a direct link to very highly contaminated runoff from the informal settlement upstream, and gives us an opportunity to trial nature-based solutions, innovations, and methods in a very real-world context at a scale that starts to give us a means to really show what can be achieved without using chemicals, without using electricity, with making use of nature-based solutions in any ways that we can. So this is one of the sort of test beds. It's taken, the picture is taken from above. You can see what's happened here at the top is that we have transformed the old sludge drying beds from the wastewater treatment plant facility. They've been dug out and they've been repurposed as a biofiltration treatment train. So what happens here is that water is taken from the Stabile River. Remember, I showed you that it ran alongside and through the water hub. It goes into a tank above this, what's called the SMART system. This was during the process of building the SMART system. SMART stands for Sequential Managed Aquifer Recharge Treatment. It's essentially a sand filter on steroids. So the water goes from the river into that bottom green tank. It's then pumped using solar into the two storage tanks above the biofiltration treatment train, and the water is gravity fed through that treatment train through different cells. The LS stands for large stone, so there's a stone aggregate in there between 19 and 25 millimeters. It then goes into a biochar chamber, and then into a small stone chamber at the end. From there, the treated water is then routed into the SMART cell, and through that sand filter process, it is discharged either into the river or into a vegetable growing experiment. So one of the experiments at the water hub is looking at the removal of emerging contaminants from polluted surface waters. This is obviously a very key problem in contaminated water that comes off, particularly off informal settlements in our context in South Africa, but also not only informal settlements, although we're certainly picking up the very high concentrations of these emerging contaminants in the runoff from here because of the lack of services. So the chemicals, emerging contaminants in this regard are pharmaceuticals, lifestyle markers like caffeine, microplastics, personal care products. They're present in trace amounts, and they're very persistent in our environmental waters, and they're certainly resistant to degradation and can bioaccumulate in soil, crops, and even humans. So this is, of course, of concern in a very unregulated environment like we are in, and it is an experiment that's been undergoing now for a couple of years to try and see whether the nature-based solution, the treatment train that has been established at the water hub, can remove these CECs sufficiently so that we can make use of this water in peri-urban agriculture. There are small-scale farmers in this area, but also all around South Africa, who could make use of treated, contaminated runoff in this way. So the project is supported by the Water Research Commission in South Africa. It's looking at the presence and concentrations of different chemicals of emerging concern. It's looking at the accumulation of these CECs in plant tissue, and it's also looking at determining the suitability of the NBS treatment train for remediation, together with some basic risk assessment and reuse guidelines. This is just a map showing how the Stabile River, which rises, it's a very small catchment area above the informal settlement of Langrich, which is the yellow block in the middle. Langrug, as I mentioned, then the river flows past Langrug and through the more formal settlement of Groendal, through the agricultural area, bypasses the water hub, and then goes into the Franschhoek River, which is the river at the bottom of the picture. And the Franschhoek River is a tributary of the Berg River, one of our main irrigation sources for fruit that is largely exported to the EU. So it's important that we make sure that the water that is being used to irrigate fruit is of decent quality. And you can see the sort of pictures on the right-hand side here showing the type of conditions through the informal settlement that really contribute to very highly contaminated surface water that's running into that Stabile River. So what are context appropriate solutions here? And we, again, in our context in the Southern Hemisphere, we're looking for easy to maintain, cost-effective and scalable solutions that can be put in place at a decentral scale, because trying to do this within an informal settlement becomes very difficult. There's not a lot of space. There's a lot of interference by sort of residents in the informal settlement. So to have a solution that can be managed off-site, but that can still deal with the levels of contamination that are coming off the informal settlement becomes really important. And in this regard, we considered constructed wetlands. So these little biofiltration cells become our constructed wetlands. We use adsorptive substrates, and I'll talk about that a bit more. And there is also the possibility of microalgal remediation, which is happening in a separate project, and I won't talk about that today, but that also becomes one of the appropriate solutions for this. So the biochar that we're using in the treatment train is produced from alien vegetation and used as this low-cost adsorbent in the constructed wetland in this biofiltration system. The nice thing about this is that we have a twofold problem around water in the Western Cape, and alien vegetation is one of our main issues. So the alien vegetation that has proliferated in the catchment areas for our surface water systems needs to be cut down. And if we can repurpose this invasive biomass into an effective adsorbent that can be used in the biofiltration cell in a passive and very low maintenance treatment system, it does provide us with a way to kill two birds with one stone, really. In South Africa, we have black wattle, pine, and eucalyptus, all invasive trees that are growing in these catchment areas, and they all provide sustainable, abundant feedstocks for the making biochar using a pyrolysis method. So you can see here there's a picture of the biochar that we've used in one of the treatment cells at the water hub. In the next door cell, you can see the large stone in this case, and in this case also there's been some vegetation that has been put in as part of this system. And some of the field scale work is showing us some good preliminary results. This is a PhD project that's still underway. You can see the type of emerging contaminants that we're looking at here. So the acetaminophen is a anti-inflammatory drug. Caffeine, they are both well removed. The average percentage reduction of these contaminants through the constructed wetland was approaching 100%. Lamivudine is a antiretroviral drug that is obviously very extensively used in our low-income settlements in South Africa. So these are important pharmaceuticals for us to try and see whether they come out of the effluent through the NBS system. And we are getting mixed results across the suite of emerging contaminants that include pharmaceuticals like ARVs, but also TB drugs, as well as others in this system. But as emerging work, I think it's showing some great potential for the removal of these contaminants. And future work in this particular project is looking at what the uptake of the CECs are in crops. So this is also happening at the Water Hub. There's a little experimental garden there that is being watered with different water sources, from raw river water to the biofiltered treated water and municipal tap. They're looking at upcoming harvests. They're doing liquid extractions of the plant tissue and LCMS analysis of the CECs. And from there, we'll try and compare the relative uptake and accumulation of CECs by these different crops that are irrigated with the different water sources. So trying to come up with a risk assessment framework associated with consuming these crops. So the project plan for phase 2 of the Water Hub is really taking this now into much more of a focus on building social enterprises through these different forms of livelihood creation with treated water, and bringing in other food stocks, if you like, really looking at this waste water energy nexus. So bringing in food waste and organic waste, using biodigesters to develop fertilizers with sustainable cooking gas, upscaling the treatment system so that we have large volumes of water that can be used, and then, of course, providing further irrigation water to local farms to try and bring this into a sort of circular economy around what we're doing at the Water Hub. And here you can see some of the pictures that support that, sort of a further expansion of these old sludge drying beds into more biofilters, bringing in employment opportunities, collecting this organic waste from what is a very productive food environment in a place like Franschhoek, and also working with biogas. Sorry, I've gone a bit fast there. Oh no, there we go. And so here, just some of these livelihood opportunities, as I've mentioned, would be around irrigation of vegetables and the soil with treated and untreated water to study the mobility and uptake of emerging contaminants, as well as things like non-food related aspects like growing cut flowers for local market opportunities could be another way for us to really close this loop around the treatment and use of water. So another aspect to what we've been doing at the Water Hub is the restoration of the Stabile River, this very small river that runs down through the small catchment and past the informal settlement of Langrug. It's a very polluted river. And in 2021, when we started thinking about the river restoration, it was very overgrown with alien vegetation and did not have good quality of water in and around the river at that time. So there've been several projects that have been underway to look at the restoration of the river together with the Western Cape government, with our provincial Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, to re-establish the indigenous fynbos in this area, and to re-look at how we can increase biodiversity, bird life, reptiles, aquatic species, and increase the sort of water quality in that river through a very targeted restoration process. So we did this in 2023. There was an intervention to restore the Stabile River. This is an overhead shot that sort of shows you some of the infrastructure at the Water Hub. You can even see some of the old wastewater treatment infrastructure that's still in place bottom left there, and how they started to open up the Stabile River that runs alongside. You can see the biofiltration cells. At that stage, it was only one set of biofiltration cells. The river was starting to be opened up with planting and an irrigation system in place. But then in September 2023, there was a massive flood. 300 millimeters of rain fell over Franschhoek in a matter of 24 hours. And this did some severe damage, both to the river, but also to the infrastructure, our treatment infrastructure around the biofiltration cells, which you can see here were completely covered in sediment and mud. So it took an enormous effort to rebuild the river, rebuild the biofiltration cells, but also to really work on re-establishing that river corridor. And as you can see here, in October 2025, there's been a remarkable recovery of that river corridor, and a remarkable recovery too of the experiment that has been going with the biofiltration cells. A significant effort by students, by researchers, lots of extra cost. But as you can see here, we're really starting to develop a useful and restored and resilient river system that is being contributed to by the experiment and the treatment train that's happening. So this is sort of one real sort of aspect of the Living Lab approach at the Water Hub. There's several other projects that are on the go at the Water Hub, but it's starting to demonstrate a really good integration of water, energy, and waste, and how we can build that into connection with the environment and building biodiversity as well. So I think I've shown you a little bit about how we think about improving water quality and addressing risk through nature-based solutions. And this slide really just shows some of the other projects that we also busy with at the Future Water Institute, where we're trying to understand how waterways and public health intersect and what the health vulnerabilities are when we think about climate change impacts. We also have a number of projects looking at groundwater, seas and groundwater, but also the microbial indicators in there and whether we can use them for biosurveillance. But another project that I wanted to just talk to you about quickly today is one that we call Pathways to Water Resilient South African Cities. And the picture here at the bottom is a picture of a retrofitted stormwater pond that we have been working in Mitchell's Plain for the last 4 to 5 years. We have done CEC monitoring here, but more importantly, we're looking at how a low-cost nature-based retrofit can have an impact both on the infiltration of water into the ground from this particular stormwater pond, and so enhance, we hope, managed aquifer recharge and act as a water resource aside from being a flood alleviation mechanism. But also what other benefits could something like this provide in an urban space? So let me just talk to you a little bit about that. So the key elements of this project are that we're trying to use nature-based approaches, again, to link storm runoff and wastewater to water supply, and to use those NBS or water-sensitive urban design elements and landscape-based solutions to try and integrate the already existing built infrastructure with some green infrastructure in a decentralized manner, but that starts to connect up into what we hope will ultimately be a sort of water-sensitive city transition within a city like Cape Town that starts to really connect up these blue-green infrastructure moments across the city into something that provides something bigger than just the sum of all of there are. So there are a number of about 850 stormwater ponds in the city of Cape Town. We're quite flat except where it's not flat. With the mountain, the bits in between are flat. We call it the Cape Flats. And in the Cape Flats, there are around 300 stormwater ponds that work to prevent flooding in these areas. They're prone to seasonal flooding. The Cape Flats aquifer is quite shallow, and the water table reaches the surface during most years. So this is a space that really needs quite careful consideration for flood alleviation, but also provides us the opportunity to really work towards this transition towards water resilience. So the project, you've seen a picture of the pond. This was it before construction. The two inlets on the left from a small urban catchment. There's an outlet sort of in the middle towards the right-hand side. That really, the design of this pond was such that the inlets largely short-circuited the pond straight through to the outlet, and there was very seldom any settling of water in this detention pond, and that it would generally just flow straight out of the outlet and join the rest of the stormwater management system and go, into further ponds downstream and into the piped system. So we worked with local residents and to co-design a low-cost effort to try and capture the water as much as possible in this pond system. So the idea here was that we opened out the inlets, we put rock riprap down to slow down the flow of water into the pond. We built a shallow, about a 300 millimeter high sandbag wall using the sand that we dug out of the site to develop about a meter and a half wide infiltration swale that runs along the contour for about 90 meters in front of the two inlets. After construction, you can see here in these two pictures, so the inlet then, there was a forebay that created in front of the two inlets. The water then flowed into this infiltration swale that ran around the contour, in front of the two inlets. There were little rock check litter traps at various stages across this infiltration swale that allowed the water to go through but kept litter back, which is a major issue in this particular environment. Keeping the litter from entering the main part of the pond has made the sort of cleanup of this area much easier. So the key findings in phase one was that we could do a low-cost retrofit. We could work with residents' consent and input, and we had some really good input from local residents. The high water table was found to be a technical challenge, but the retrofit did increase the infiltration into the groundwater based on the hydrological model that was developed and calibrated with our measurements. And future scenarios with the City of Cape Town now abstracting water from the Cape Flats as part of their new water program can allow us to result in more stormwater harvesting up to about 110% of the current infiltration. Additionally, we found that the soil, even in the low depths beneath our infiltration swale and across the scope of the pond, could remove large quantities of both metals and phosphorus from the incoming stormwater. So, these were good findings. We were increasing the infiltration and we were improving the water quality of the water going into the pond. But more than that, we found that this pond system suddenly became a focus for building resilience in a city that really needs these type of green spaces, and where they are very seldom used as anything other than dumping sites. They're prone to informal settlement invasion, and they're not used for useful or positive functions within the city. So we've done quite a lot of other work at this pond to try and highlight this, to try and bring people into the space, to increase the community gathering, and to think about this enhancing the biodiversity. So I just want to show you a little bit more about what we've done. Community collaboration, as I said, became really key. There you can see one of our teams, construction teams that were busy with the sandbag construction in the beginning. But we've also, through a series of interventions and student projects over the 5 years that we worked in this space, the 5 years of this living lab, we've had a number of awareness raising and safeguarding processes. We've co-designed and managed. We've built local stewardship with these residents. We've acknowledged that actually having that local stewardship and involvement in these spaces becomes the benefit there becomes around enhancing safety and security and preventing land invasions. But it also gives local people a chance to do citizen science and monitoring, and for us to actually work with local schools on education programs and to make sure that those community anchors in some way provide the opportunity for job creation and funding in what is a relatively impoverished neighborhood. So to do this, we've tried to curate this biodiverse landscape. And to be honest, we haven't had to do a lot of planting. Most of the very local indigenous vegetation has re-established itself, as you can see in the bottom picture there, in the sort of wetland area, because it has been allowed to re-establish itself. There is now a no-mow policy in the middle part of the pond, to the extent that we've established a sort of stepping stone barrier around that wetland in the middle to prevent accidental mowing by the city. But we've also have worked on trying to establish some particular wetland plants and particularly special indigenous plants in planted areas around the site to encourage people to come in and care and manage the site. We've worked with local residents also on livelihood opportunities. So not only through the construction process, we did sandbag technology seminars with them around building sandbag homes, for example, but also when we did the original construction, but also around green skills development. In some of these photos here, you can see a seed harvesting process. So harvesting seeds from indigenous plants and teaching local residents how to ensure that they can grow these indigenous plants, perhaps even set up local nurseries and start getting an idea on the importance of medicinal and herbal plants in this space. Of course, there's recreation and amenity value. So through the creation of this wetland and the establishment of this protected space, we were able to put up signage. We were able to explain the process of what we were trying to do. We had a coordinated mural painting activity that happened together with local residents and with a local artist collective that tells the story of the stormwater pond and actually tells the story of why it's important to really protect this space and ensure that it is safeguarded for future generations. Nature education for primary and high schools has been really important. So we've developed learning materials, we've worked with local schools, we have what we call a Guardians of the Pond process that we work through with local schools. They become their own guardians, they create pledges to look after spaces, and they get involved in planting activities and biodiversity assessment activities and the like. And of course, academic research, both from a very wide variety of academic research projects, from civil engineering with the hydrology and the water quality modeling, to landscape architecture, to urban design, to social anthropology, to yeah, all sorts of different projects that are establishing themselves in the living lab that has been created around this pond. And then very lastly, just to show that, you know, the university also acts as a living lab, and I'm pretty sure that this happens across many universities around the world. We are currently establishing what's known as the Green Precinct in our lower campus at UCT, where we are constructing a decentralized wastewater treatment facility. It's a membrane bioreactor, so it's an established, it's not in and of itself a nature-based solutions, but it is a containerized wastewater treatment facility that then offers the opportunity for us to monitor the effluent through this facility, discharge it into a constructed wetland around what is being built as a demonstration and training facility where we can run seminars, where we can do teaching, where we can actually demonstrate the power of nature-based solutions to polish effluent, to be able to use that treated water for irrigation purposes around the site, but also on sports fields, for flushing toilets in the buildings and in residences, and to showcase the sort of benefits of more sustainable ways of managing water across our campus. So we're very excited about it. It's in the final stages of construction and should be operational by early next year. So yeah, very lastly, we thinking about a water resilient approach for South Africa. I've shown you a couple of examples for what we're doing at Future Water, but essentially it is about integrating across these different water sectors. So it's not only about flooding, it's not only about drought, it's also about the ways in which people intersect in these sectors. It's about things like wildfires and the sort of socioeconomic problems that we are finding across our cities. So how do we break these silos so that we build resilience across all of these different risks? Emphasizing the links between drought, flood, and other water-related challenges, and really optimizing and integrating the management of all available water resources. So it's not only surface, it's groundwater, wastewater, stormwater. They're all important to be integrated into this space. Harnessing nature through blue-green infrastructure, through urban waterscapes, and through nature-based solutions is incredibly important. And then trying to understand how governance can be used to address this resilience through different scales and through different actors. So for us, this building resilience and creating these livable urban areas that place high value on water really allows us to engage with a more transformative vision for the future of urban water in South Africa. And I would imagine that really this would apply in many urban areas around the world. And I think that is me. So thank you very much for listening, and I'd be very happy to answer questions.
Yes, thank you. That was very interesting. I have so many questions, but I probably won't get to all of them. Maybe just, I remember a few years back, maybe 10 years, the water quality in the Cape Flats aquifer was actually quite bad, and we couldn't use it. I think it was used for agricultural purposes, maybe. Has that improved in any way due to all the new kind of measures that's been put in place? Is that water usable 4 times like day 0, for instance?
So there are differing opinions about the water quality in the Cape Flats. And of course, as you know, aquifers are not one homogeneous dam. underneath underneath the surface. So there certainly are parts of the aquifer that are quite badly polluted from sort of anthropogenic activity, but there is also large parts of the aquifer that are used very much for urban agriculture. So in the Philippi horticultural area, for example, it's a large area that runs alongside the our site actually. There's, I think, about half of the vegetables, the locally consumed vegetables in Cape Town are grown in that area. So the water quality is not, it has not stopped the ability to actually make use of water in the Cape Flats. And of course, during the drought, many people dug boreholes. Many people drilled boreholes to ensure that they could keep their swimming pools going, their gardens going, and all the rest. So if you had money, people were drilling boreholes. So that has now been brought into a more structured approach to the use of groundwater from the Cape Flats by the city, and it's part of the new water strategy. The city's strategy around managed aquifer recharge on the Cape Flats is to inject highly treated wastewater into the aquifer. So it's treated to almost potable, and it is used to recharge that aquifer in parts where they are considering abstraction, and that abstraction will then go into a sort of blended system to join the rest of the sources for the city of Cape Town. So it's part of the new water strategy. And I think there has been a lot more done on analyzing the water quality on the Cape Flats, and I think it's less of a problem than they originally thought in terms of quality. It seems to be more or less okay in most of the places. Yeah.
So would that be artificial recharge through a borehole? Injection through a borehole? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So the scheme has a number of injection boreholes across a specific part of the aquifer. Obviously, they've got to be very careful about over abstraction for problems like seawater intrusion and the like. So the conditions of the permit that they have from the National Department of Water and Sanitation are that they have to recharge to a certain volume, and they're using, as I say, they have upgraded the one of the sewage treatment works so that it has advanced tertiary treatment to get the effluent treated to near potable, and they're using that to inject into the aquifer.
Okay.
So the stormwater infiltration is happening, but it isn't being put to scale yet, not while they're still working on the larger process of trying to bring in these other resources.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I, it's very nice to see you again, Kirsty. Sorry, I was a couple of minutes late. And it's already 8 years that I've been in the Water Hub, and so much things have changed as well.
Okay.
And also in the sense of what you're measuring. So a lot of emerging substances, and so how, because and also some elements. I'm just gonna as Sharon, I have a lot of questions, but we should catch up, and especially some things that you're doing that might really relate to our work as well. I think it's quite innovating to have alien plants, as you call them, to make into biochar, and then you showed that picture. That's a lot of biochar that you actually harvest, I could say. So that's quite an operation. And also what were you telling about the measuring of all the contaminants, because that's quite costly. And some of these contaminants are not very easy to measure also in laboratories here. And so how do you and do you, okay, many questions also. Do you have continuous measurements as well? Is it only grab samples, or how what are you doing?
So it's not continuous measurements for us, for exactly the reason that we can't, that we don't have the funding to do that.
No, exactly.
So there's a sampling program that is involved with various different projects that are associated with this, and we're looking at obviously the river. We're characterizing what's happening in the river, and we're also looking through the biofiltration treatment train and through those different points within that treatment train to try and understand what's happening at different points. We've focused quite specifically after an initial non-target analysis, a non-target screening of the CECs to try and see what we were dealing with in this environment. We've focused on a fairly low number of target contaminants, particularly around these ARVs, because we see those as a major problem, and the TB drugs, which are used very heavily, but also some of these other markers, and some quite interesting ones on illicit drugs, let me be honest, also on what gets used in informal settlements, and we're starting to see when they get used and what times of the day and which days of the week, and how this is affecting the quality of the water. So there's several projects that support the analysis of this. Obviously, through various projects, we're able to apply funding to do the analytical work. We're also developing in-house methods with equipment. We now have a lab at Future Water with equipment that we are developing methods for particular emerging contaminants, and we're working with other universities. So we're trying to avoid having to send samples for very expensive analysis externally. So, all of this is building expertise through various different projects that have supported different parts of the process. And whilst it's certainly not continuous monitoring, it is now beginning to give us seasonal fluctuations, temporal fluctuations, what's happening at different points in the river, and trying to give us some indication of what's actually going on through this treatment system. Yeah.
Nice.
Have I answered everything? What else did you ask?
No, we could have a whole episode on this. I'm sure that Joe from the UK has the same. You want to measure so much, and there's a limited budget, and there are emerging substances, so you don't even know. And especially grab samples, you might miss, the essential moments. So it's probably you have a wish list as well, Joe. So we should maybe.
Particularly interested, Kirsty, in the large stone filter. What value does that add? How much pollutant you find that captures? I'm quite keen to try one over here, so I'm kind of keen to learn how yours is going.
Yeah. I mean, the large stone. So I didn't put the results in this thing, but we can certainly share some results, and there are papers now on the different systems. So obviously the biochar is giving us the best value, and I think there are different reasons for that. And in fact, what was quite interesting is that we also looked at 3 different types of biochar. So we looked at pine, eucalyptus, and what we call black wattle. It's an acacia species, and the different trees create different biochar. Certainly in terms of the holes, what do you call them? The holes is not the right word. Anyway, pores. Thank you very much. The pores in the biochar. So, and we found the pine biochar worked the best in that regard. But the large stones actually did work quite well. They work better than the small stones. And I guess, again, it's because of the surface area that allows the buildup of bacteria and the biofilms and the sort of mechanism to clean that water. So I can certainly share some results with you, Joe, from what we've done. We've tried, there've been a number of things over the years. At one point, they were even trying with peach pips as a media in these cells. So we've tried various things, and the focus at the moment is really on this biochar because of this sort of nexus thing, the waste to also helping us with the water treatment and to trying to have this a dual focus on how we can clear catchments and use the biochar
Yeah, I don't
and bring
trust
in
the
social enterprise.
Yeah, I don't trust the engineers here they will, if they get the bit between their teeth in the use of biochar, they'll just start burning anything. They'll start cutting down mature trees and people's fences, and I don't trust them. So I'm cautious about the use of biochar unless we've got a known and recognised source of organic material, because otherwise they'll. The other thing I wanted to ask was, what else is happening in the informal settlement to try and reduce the source of, is there work going on to try and improve the sewage infrastructure and reduce littering in the stream and stuff? Or is that politically difficult?
No, well, so I think the problem with informal settlement service delivery is that it's growing faster than any local authority can keep abreast of.
Yeah.
So it's not an excuse. And, I do think more effort needs to go into the provision of functioning toilets infrastructure in informal settlements. Most informal settlements do have access to some form of toilets. Virtually all of them do, actually. But the problem is the basic level of service is one toilet per 5 families.
Wow.
And in an informal settlement, and the ways that these toilets are used, they block extremely easily. So, you might find the provision is 40 toilets in a part of an informal settlement, and only 3 are working. It's that's the problem, that you end up with really dysfunctional toilet infrastructure and virtually no drainage. So what happens is that the toilets don't work, people use, and they're not safe, particularly at night. So people use potties or some other form of sanitation at nighttime. That gets chucked into either the river or the street, because drainage is not managed properly. And mixed in with all of this is the solid waste problem. So, I do think that local authorities try their best. I think that they come up against a whole raft of other problems around electricity provision, around housing provision, around general issues to do with no jobs, around, real poverty challenges. So it's a difficult one. There are efforts being made to improve things, but it's not something that's happening quickly.
I think also because it's an informal area, there's no proper roads, and the road width is also too little for trucks to get in to collect solid waste. So they normally have skips at certain positions within these areas, and people have to walk there and dump their rubbish there. And these aren't always emptied at a regular kind of time frame. So that also adds to the problem, because it's an informal area that doesn't have proper roads and services. So it's like a snowball effect.
It's a wicked problem. It really is. We're working on another project that's sort of linked to the water hub, but we're actually working in the informal settlement, trying to divert some of the very highly contaminated stormwater into a decentralized small ABR system, and to use that water to irrigate a sports field. So to try and keep it circular in the settlement. And we're working with local settlement residents now. But firstly, you never get one unified voice in a settlement. So somebody might want a sports field, and somebody else actually wants to water, crops for their cows or whatever it is. So there's this tension all the time in trying to improve a system and ensure that people are engaged and are supportive of it. So it's a work in progress.
That's true everywhere, isn't it? That's true globally, that you'll never get one unified, but everybody wants something different. So I've got to go, but it's been fantastic, Kirsty. Thank you very much indeed. I'll see you all soon.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Lovely to
thank
chat.
you.
Bye.
Yeah, and I was wondering, how is this whole thing managed? For example, the water hub, because you're talking about many people involved, not only students, locals with the local authority. You're doing science, they're doing engineering, biodiversity research, all different stuff, and a lot of people are involved. And I heard you say we a lot, and you talked about the university and different disciplines, but I can hardly imagine that that's it. Who's managing the whole people part interacting with the physical part?
That's a really good question, Sydney. And as Floris knows, Kevin Winter. And Kevin is he is the sort of research director for the Water Hub. He's an emeritus professor at UCT. So he's retired from his day job, but he's still managing the activities at the Water Hub. He has a site supervisor that stays there, that lives on site, that we need to have. And that person is somebody who does the day-to-day moving of pipes and checking that things aren't blocked and all of that sort of thing. But it's a really difficult job. You know, this is 70 kilometers from UCT. It takes us over an hour to get there from the university. So, you know, we go out, probably teams go out, students and researchers probably go out 3 times a week. But you need to have that continuity in order to be able to both check on the projects, but also coordinate them all, because there's not only one project that's happening there. So we're actually in the process of recruiting a project manager for the Water Hub. And we're really hoping that will alleviate some of the pressure from Kevin, because, you know, it's not something that he's going to be able to do forever. And we really need to still be able to have somebody on site that can really act as that coordinator for all of those activities, because it's a lot.
Yeah, so you're partly dependent of effort that people personally put into a project themselves. Which is sadly often the case, but often necessary to get this thing started. All right. Really interesting.
Very recognizable, actually, you know, from field labs that we have in the Netherlands as well. You know, also people leave. Not everybody is as enthusiastic as Kevin, so to say. And you know, we all need a Kevin or a Piet, or you know, in Delft is different, but we really need people to be on site and be there actually 24 hours. So that's a big job. But
it is a big job.
Quite impressive that it's still there. Quite impressive, all the things that you're doing. It's really growing, and especially those publications. That will be great also to spread the news about the water hubs and see maybe next time we can go also in detail about the long list of other questions we have. But I think it will be nice to catch up. And maybe also set up something, you know, maybe you know, we do the wet skills or the climate cafe or something like that. That will be great. I would love to see it again, and maybe take some equipment and see where we can start together. That will be awesome.
I mean, the wet skills, they've just been here with and I saw Johan and others on last week. So and the WISA conference is in July next year. The WISA, the biannual Water Institute of South Africa, their conference is in Cape Town in July, and so there's going to be a wet skills event aligned with that.
So I will get in touch with Johan as well. And there's Erasmus as well. So there are quite some opportunities. We can catch up on that later with Charnay as well. And Sydney is really enthusiastic to go to South Africa as well. So
well, now I am. No, honestly, this is one of the best integrated.
Maybe not in July though.
Good point.
Well, they're very much used to the rain and the cold, so for them that's nothing.
No
that's
problem.
like autumn.
It's
you need
right
to be
now.
here at this time of the year.
And I just
Yeah.
heard this morning from the chair of the Climatorium in the Netherlands that they are starting a Climatorium in South Africa. So that's
Oh.
another opportunity.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Cape Town or?
He didn't specify, he just said
Oh.
South Africa. So
All right.
Okay.
yeah,
Because it's still a
exciting.
big country. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
We should catch up. That's
Very
the
big.
bottom line, probably. Yeah. Nice.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good. Yeah.
really
All
great.
right.
Thank you very much.
That's a pleasure. Yeah. And if you think of anything that you need to ask, then just let me know. But I'll send through the publications.
Thank you. That would be
That's
great
great.
also.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Right.
So we
Well,
close out
good.
with yeah. That's what you all
Yes,
say, right?
I
Yeah.
enjoyed the so yeah. That
Yeah.
was very close to home.
Yes, nice to hear a South African accent. Hey.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
And
So,
what's going on next week, Shernay?
yeah,
Sydney, should I?
I think you've
Okay.
organized the most about it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next week we start a 3-week series dedicated to the Sparkles project, which I'm also very excited about. And that relates to the upscaling of nature positive floating solar parks. And linked to the project is Emma van Veenendaal, and she's a PhD student from Del Torres. And she will tell us about freshwater ecosystems and floating solar. So that will be ClimateCafe 1 of 3 dedicated to sparkles.
Nice.
It's already interesting.
Looking forward.
All right.
Yes.
All right.
So
Hope to
have
see
a great
you
evening,
there.
everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kirsty.
Thanks again, Kirsty. We catch
Thanks
up.
a lot.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Ja, we hadden nog wel langer inderdaad met haar blijven kunnen